Hey guys, Kingpin here. Welcome to the next episode of Sandbox Mode. In case you missed the last episode, we actually started our very first mega build of this zoo. This is Asia Quest, and it's already home to two wonderful species. The first animal to call Asia Quest home was the red-crowned crane, and they're really happy here so far. This species was an incredibly interesting one to build for, as they're shockingly tall and have a large hitbox. Their environmental needs also aren't really fit for a beginner. They need a lot of water and open space. Regardless, we managed to persevere and build them a habitat in which they are incredibly happy. We did really good. Sharing the habitat with the red-crowned crane is the Japanese macaque. This is an incredibly interesting species to have sharing this habitat with them because they require two completely different things. The cranes can't climb and like heat, while the macaques can climb and like cold, so we built a special section of the exhibit which only the macaques can access. This section is simply just their indoor viewing, which we'll get to much later in the video. If you guys are enjoying this mini-series of Asia Quest, why not like and subscribe? We're on the push to 1,000, and we're so close. With a new DLC coming out today, if my upload schedule worked out, there's no better time to get into Planet Zoo. It's well worth it. Today we're going to be tackling an area where I traditionally struggle with, and that's building an exhibit in a really small and condensed area, but an area that requires an exhibit nonetheless. There's no better example of this than right here in Asia Quest. Luckily, the Binturong doesn't need a whole lot of space. Matter of fact, they're among the lowest amount of space in the game. Be sure to stick around until the end of the video. There's something really satisfying about a really small exhibit that's highly detailed. We're also going to be name-dropping the zoo at the end of the video. I can't believe it's taken this long to do it, but you guys aren't going to want to miss it. This zoo just keeps getting better and better with every video. Typically I don't add my animals into the enclosure until they're well under construction. However, in this exhibit, I did the exact opposite of that. The Binturong was actually the very first thing I did aside from putting the null barrier through, which we did in the last episode. The reason that I added the animal first in this sense is because we're dealing with such a small area, every square meter is going to count in order to get this animal to 100% wellness, so we have to frequently be checking the traversable area heat map, and in order to do that, you have to have the animal actually in the exhibit. Just ignore the 0% wellness for now, I promise it'll get better. Binturong have an incredibly small hitbox, but that doesn't necessarily mean their enrichment items do. This is especially challenging when trying to build for them in such a small enclosure. Luckily, there are ways around this. We'll get into that later in the video when we delve into their climbing requirements, but for now, just know that we can't have large items like this foraging tree or even the foraging pool which they typically like, because that would literally take up about half their exhibit, which we don't have any room to spare right now. As you can see, a Binturong only needs 182 square meters of land requirement and about 40 square meters of climbing requirement. However, this is only for one of them. Their minimum social group is 2 adults, which means you're going to have to add 20 meters to each of those. Even with their social group requirement making those numbers slightly misleading, Binturong are still an extremely cost-effective animal and are also extremely space-effective, since even with 2 of them, they don't need that much space at all. Matter of fact, they're among the top 3 lowest animals in the game, based on land requirements. They don't need any water, which is good. Water typically takes up a ton of space, and climbing does not, since you can always build climbing equipment vertical. That doesn't take up their space on the ground, since it's all in the air. Binturong are incredibly skilled climbers, however they're not very fast. That means all of their climbing equipment is going to need to be outright connected, and they're not going to be jumping from tree to tree or climbing equipment piece to other climbing equipment piece, such as an animal like our Japanese macaque might. This build overall is extremely similar to the aforementioned Japanese macaque, however after this we're going to have a lot of variety in the builds coming up. Now that I think about it, this build in particular actually shares a striking resemblance with our black and white rough lemur and red panda enclosure. I didn't really plan for that, they're just animals that seem like good starters. However, coming next is probably going to be either the gharial or the sun bear, and after that we'll do the other one of the 2 we didn't do first, but then after those 2, we have the Bengal tiger. So those are all going to be vastly different exhibits, so sorry if it's been repetitive. I didn't really plan for it to be like this, it just happened to be the order I'd built the exhibits in. As I said before, today, if everything went according to plan, should be July 30th, which means there's going to be 2 new content drops, the Grassland Pack and the Africa DLC. I personally am really excited for African penguins to come to the game. They're one of my absolute favorite animals, just in general, not even in this game, and I cannot wait to build for them. Like we're focusing on in this exhibit, a lot of the animals in these two packs are really small. I'm thinking things like meerkats, fennec foxes, African penguins. A lot of those animals don't take up a whole lot of space, such as our binturongs right here, such as our red pandas and black and white rough lemurs. I find these animals a lot more interesting to build for, because building in a time crunch, and especially a space crunch, makes you be more creative, and I really like that aspect of the game. While working on the Center of Primate Conservation, which if you didn't know was our second franchise zoo ever on the channel, almost 3 months ago at this point, we've been doing this for a while, I actually discovered a cool little trick you can do to get a little bit more traversable area for animals that like climbing. What you can effectively do is use climbing equipment to make a small little roof of the enclosure, and then that also doubles as climbing space and traversable area land, so that way you can kill two birds with one stone. This is an extremely effective way of making a really small habitat fit the requirements the animals need. Think about animals like raccoons, any species of lemur, binturong, or anything that climbs. Even a red panda would be good for this trick. Back to the exhibit at hand. Binturong like a lot of plant variety and plant life in their exhibit, but one thing that I did that I found quite creative was when I was placing the null barrier, I left a significant space in between their actual exhibit and then where the next exhibit starts, which is our cranes. I did this because I wanted to have a lot of bigger trees to break up the view of the binturong from further away. That way, as soon as you're walking into Asia Quest, you're not immediately drawn to the binturong. We want the guest's first impression to be of the macaque's outdoor enclosure and the crane's enclosure. This way, as soon as they cross the bridge, their attention is then diverted to the binturong, because now they can actually see it, because there's not going to be a whole lot of plant life interrupting the view from the opposite side of the bridge. You just won't be able to have the best view of the binturong from super far away, which also works out, because binturong, as you can see, aren't very big animals. It would be a completely different story if these were elephants, tigers, a species of bear, or anything of the sorts, but binturongs are quite small. I'd say they're slightly larger than an average raccoon. I placed the plants in a semi-interesting way that I don't typically do in this exhibit. With this ivy, we're not necessarily adding it for detail, but practicality. Just like with these Himalayan trees that we added, we're trying to break up the guest view, which we just discussed. But also, the one thing that I really liked in this exhibit is we added a tree in the center that's a completely different color than all of the ones in the surrounding area. Most of the trees in this zoo so far have green leaves, like a normal tree does. However, this one has red, orange, and yellow leaves, and we're placing leaves of the same color at the base of the tree, so maybe the binturongs have been climbing around. Who knows? Now that the exhibit is semi-detailed up, not entirely done yet, but we'll get to that, I decided to then work on the outside of the building a little bit and do some roofing. I decided to go with these little triangular slopes. I thought they looked incredibly nice, and then it would also allow the binturong to get some sun if they happen to go up into the top of their enclosure, which, spoiler alert, they commonly like to do. In order to avoid them getting too hot, I decided to add some ivy aligned to the surface up there to block out the sun. After that, I quickly made sure everywhere was traversable for them, and it looked like it was completely good. There was only one thing left to do. I had to add some little details and plants to the side of their enclosure. I just added a lot of basic ferns, I added one of the new lipstick palm trees, some dogwood bushes, elephant ear plants, and a few other various little bushes and shrubs, just to break up the monotony of the grass, and just to shove it to the complexity meter just that little bit more. It really doesn't like me. The last major detail we have to add are the supports to the building. This is quite simple. I literally just copy and pasted these parts exactly from our red panda enclosure. Effectively, all we did was take some wood beams, recolor them since they're painted, and then just space them out quite evenly, just to make it look like the mesh isn't free floating and to make it look like it would take more than a strong breeze to knock this exhibit down. I actually really like the effect. I think this is so simple. It's really easy to do if you just rotate this in increments of 45 degrees, and simply you can make a wall with it, you can make supports with it. This is just a very effective technique. Just make sure you don't block the door so the zookeepers can actually get in. I've made that mistake more than once, and it is really easy to do. If you want to avoid that, simply just rotate it another 45 degrees and place them accordingly. Since we're not doing any animal name reveals in this episode, we should probably reveal the name for the zoo finally. Welcome to the Orchid City Zoo! If you'd like to know the inspiration for the name, or anything else, I'm planning on doing a Q&A at 1,000 subscribers, and as of right now, we're about 70 away, so if there's anything you'd like to know about me, whether it's in-game or personal, just leave a comment. It looks like our Binturong are officially exploring their brand new habitat. They really like to play with their enrichment items, especially the scratch post. They're incredibly happy here. Surprisingly, they actually spend the most amount of time up on their second story. I guess it's because it's isolated from the guest, because this is the one spot where guests can't actually view them. However, there is a habitat camera up here, so the Binturongs aren't as smart as they think. They've had a long day though. Let's go over the exhibit. As mentioned at the start of the video, the main goal of this exhibit, besides having two happy Binturong, was to be able to cram it in as small of a space as possible while meeting all of the animals' needs, and I think we succeeded very well in that. This exhibit is highly detailed and looks incredibly nice, despite being by far the smallest footprint of an exhibit that I've ever made in this game. I am quite happy with this. I have to admit, and be totally honest, before recording this episode, I really didn't have much of an interest in this species at all. I always thought they were kind of boring in one note, but they actually have a lot of really unique animations, and I'm quite fond of them now. I've noticed one of them really likes to sleep and kind of stay inside more all day, and the other really likes to play with his enrichment items pretty much 24/7. Don't forget to name them in the comments, and I'll be picking 2 lucky viewers in the next episode to reveal the names. I hope you enjoyed today's video, despite it being one of the shorter ones that I've made so far. Realistically speaking, this video is never going to be a long one. It was probably the smallest expansion to Asia Quest yet. However, despite its size, I think it fits really nicely into what we've already built. The next episodes, however, are going to be back to the normal length, so I hope you're looking forward to it. For now, I've got to get to work. Kingpin out. I'll see you then. Don't forget to like and subscribe.